All right. I'm going to click live now. All right, welcome everybody. I am Lisa and I'm going to be your moderator for this Q&A, and I'm here with a lot of great people whose talk you probably just heard. It was the devil's in the details. How do we incubate for non-entertainment game production? And we've already had a lot of interesting questions. I'm gonna just start off with something very easy though. Guys, would you explain, like, would you tell me what is your favorite pizza topping? Just to start off with something really easy.
You think that's easy? Well, there's all the sort
Mikkel,
of controversy about what you can put. Well, I think just beef kebab. I think that's that goes well with a lot of stuff.
That is
so
great.
I'm gonna go with.
I go for the classics. I don't eat any sort of pizza that was invented after 1975. So margarita.
You're on the safe side here. I'm going with the devil, with the hot sausage and pepperoni stuff.
I second that.
I would opt for anchovies just so that I get to keep the whole pizza. Yeah.
I have an allergy with wheat, so I cannot eat any pizza. So that's my problem.
Oh, no.
I go for like blue cheese or gorgonzola, like that on my pizza.
That's really interesting. That's more different stuff than I expected, actually.
Obviously, no one dares say pineapple, right? So.
Of course.
At
that
least...
was before 75.
Okay, so now I'm gonna just start with the questions that were asked you during the talk, and we had a question to Sebastian. Do you have an example for a serious game that did particularly well in teaching about a certain illness, circumstance, or whatever?
Educational games are a good question. Two come to mind that have had massive success in actually changing health behavior. So one is one of the very, very early original health serious games, which was basically for diabetes education, and where just sending a little first-person shooter person into your own bloodstream. No, sorry, leukemia. Sending a little first-person shooter person into your own bloodstream, shooting down the cancer cells, showed off to be very successful in increasing children's sense of efficacy around their own leukemia remission, where they had to take medication, which usually is not a nice thing to do and hard to understand why you need to do that. But that was very successful in sort of teaching the need and at the same time motivating people to actually stick with the medication by giving them a sense that they're in the control of their own health. And the game's name was Remission, exactly.
That sounds really interesting.
Remission is the name of the game, yeah. I would have said the same. I think this was one of the first being, and it was supported by a foundation, American foundation, and they also did a study along with the game, and they were testing whether it was successful at all, and well, it proved what it was meant to achieve.
Yep.
Nice. So does anyone else have any other example, or should I just go on with the next question?
Well, I
I'm not
wanted
sure
to
whether
raise one example, actually.
Sorry, please go on, Mikkel.
I wanted to raise one example, which is sort of a classic in the serious game space as well, which is Spent, which is a game where you try to live as someone who doesn't have a lot of money in America, and you have to make ends meet, and you have to figure out whether you have to repair your car so you can go to work, or you have to take the bus and that sort of stuff, which was very interesting because it tried to create empathy, which is a big discussion point in serious games, and whether you can actually create empathy. And it ended up, when they did scientific studies on it, only reinforcing existing ideas about poverty. So that if you thought that you were that poverty was a systemic issue, then you were confirmed in that by playing the game. And if you thought that that poverty was something that was the individual's fault, then you were confirmed in that idea of playing the game, which is a very interesting result. I think there hasn't been like huge studies of it, but the studies that have been done of them were like that. So I think that, I guess that was successful in raising the question, but not in actually teaching something, which is also pretty interesting.
So if no one else has anything to add, I'm just going to go on with the second question, which is actually, yeah, it's quite similar to that first question. Someone asked what your favorite serious game is, like, to everyone here. If you have anything else you wanted to say about any other serious game, you're free to do so.
My favorite serious game is Through the Darkest of Times. If you are considering this a serious game, because there you are put in the role of a person during the Second World War, and you live. You have to make a lot of decisions on how and whether or not to support the regime. And I think it was released this year only, and I think it's a very impressive game.
That sounds good. Yeah, so no one else who has any other favorite serious game?
I think it leans more into gamification through the definition, but basically the app I use most is a running app. It's called Zombies Run. And it's interactive audio, basically. And you're like a runner and you have to go for supply runs. And it's quite nice because you have you have something to do, and you can like role play in your mind while you're running, and it's actually kind of great. You can build up your colony basically. And another game that isn't a serious game, I think, it's called Cat Lady. And it touches on the topic of depression and suicide, and it's actually a point-and-click horror game, but it touches on those topics and makes you aware of it. And I think the story is well told.
I'm not sure I would term it a favorite game, but I think it's an interesting example of a very successful game, and maybe one of the early ones, the America's Army. Of course, a recruitment game and teaching game about war and army. But what's interesting about it is that I think it shows that the massive amount of resources you need to put into to make a serious game that is on par with entertainment games are, which is sadly quite often where customers' expectations are and clients' expectations are. So that's not a favorite, but an interesting example, I would say.
I agree.
Yeah, if I may give a few words on this, because I actually think, as also mentioned, the Cat Lady and quite many actually indie titles tackle the topics of the everyday life, the psychological challenges, many other, and so on. And one of these that I think really, this is a commercial game, but I think really has a huge impact is That Dragon Cancer. If you are aware. So basically the story is, it's very heavy, but the point is that it's an autobiographical story of developers who actually lost a child to cancer, and how that whole experience was. So again, it's not meant to be, I guess, the educate. It was one way they were coping, obviously, with the whole situation, but on the other hand, experiencing and sharing that experience, and generally feeling connected to others through the game itself. And so it has so many levels and angles to it. But then on the brighter side of the kind of like serious games, I mean, there are quite many especially with VR simulators of any kind of, like, I mean, if nothing else, Job Simulator is one of the very fun little kind of apps that quite many kids love to just throw things around or whatever, or the simulator, or this and that. So I mean, these are the things that also help understanding the opportunity, what tech can do, as depending then what kind of things as a developers one wants to go forward to. But as just a few examples on that side.
I have one
Right, so,
as well.
So about that zombie game, actually, that sounded very fun. It sounds so engaging. What was it called? I need to write that down.
Zombies Run.
Thank you very much. Hey, did anyone else want to say something?
Yes, Mikkel.
Yeah, I just have a weird one, which I'm not sure if it's a favorite one, but it's one that I find very interesting, which is the supermarket chain Rema 1000 in Norway. They built a training game for everyone who was hired in one of their locations, where and I think they have something like 1,000 locations or something around Norway, and they built each and every one of those stores in 3D. And then if you were hired in one of those stores, then you got access to this app where you could manage your individual store where you were hired in reality, in like in a parallel universe where they competed these stores, and then at the physical gathering that all these supermarket chains hold each year, then the store where the employees in this app, this game, where they had managed it best, they got a prize. And I think that the idea here is that to manage the store in the game, you have to do all the different jobs that are in the store, so that you're trained in the, not obviously not the actual physical stuff of it, but in the ideas of how stuff works together and how different jobs in the supermarket work together. I think that was pretty interesting, especially because these employees actually played it after work, which is sort of fascinating, because it's both a testament to what these games can do, and also like sort of a weird dystopia. The idea that you do your job and then you go home and play a game where you do your job is really interesting. So.
Yeah.
Oh, and the game was called Helt Chef.
Okay. What does it mean if you translate it? Is it like you are the boss, or?
Yeah, I think totally boss, actually, but that sounds way more street than it is, right?
Okay.
But I think that's a very fun example.
We'll check that. Sounds great.
Yeah, it actually sounds good. So about the next question, I've seen it was answered briefly in the chat already. In the other, like on the stage, it was if someone was wondering if there was a global online store just for serious games like Steam, but not for other games, just for the serious ones, and if not, if there should be one.
So to my knowledge right now, you wouldn't look for serious games, but you can go to any app store right now and look up particular kinds of things that you're interested in kind of Google Play or iOS App Store. So if you were to look there for something like mental health support or language learning or so, you'll get tons of apps that support that, a good proportion of which would then be gamified or actual games. So that would be an easy way to accessing that. I know that here in the UK, that's not necessarily helpful globally, but here in the UK, we have NICE, which is kind of a governmental consortium that tries to release kind of standards for healthcare and healthcare support. And together with the public healthcare service here, the NHS, they have a central website where any kind of, again, app that is government approved for healthcare support, again, very often mental health, and a lot of them are free to use, you would find there basically in their kind of app store. And again, a good chunk of this kind of physical health self-management or mental health support, a good chunk of them are gamified.
Wow.
I'm sorry, I think I'm the one who answered that question in the chat. so maybe to repeat it. So yeah, there are at least kind of individual different platforms specifically focusing on the, let's say, like at least I know for the teachers in USA, there is the Legends of Learning that are providing kind of like a platform for games that can be used by teachers, and similar kind of things around. So definitely they are, but nothing like Steam, nothing global, at least that, well, I'm aware of. And please do correct me, the rest of the panelists. But yeah, at least there are these kind of individual, depending what kind of games for what specific audiences, as just mentioned, like this sort of mental health or government kind of specific. But yeah, at least there are those individual.
Yeah, I was just commenting that there are plenty of products in regular app stores and so on, but I think that the problem is maybe they go under very different names. So, and they're maybe quite rarely they are called serious games. So maybe that is why they can sometimes be hard to find. But if you look at, for example, learning games for different school topics, then at least in Sweden there are platforms available that collect those and present them to teachers. But if you are just looking in the App Store, the problem can actually be to understand what kind of search terms you would need to use to find what you are looking for.
I also think there's at least the two very large areas of serious games is health and education, right? And this is a place where governments are very keen on making very detailed rules and making very detailed screening processes for curricula and for what sort of health treatment they want to sanction. And I think that there's a challenge in for any global store in managing that and figuring out where are we liable, who is liable, and how does this fit into a curriculum in that country, how does that fit into there, how does this sort of health app fit into the conception of healthcare in places around the world. Basically, I don't think anyone has cracked this yet. I wanted to mention Teacher Gaming, which is a Finnish store for educational games, which has global ambitions, but aren't there's nothing anywhere near the entertainment platforms that exist. So.
When it comes to Germany, the learning games or educational games are not very much integrated in the school life, and that is a huge problem. There is no or not enough at stage material to support the teachers to really adopt this in their lessons. And I think there is really no platform available up until now that would highlight educational or learning games for teachers. Most of the there are teachers that are still reluctant to use learning games at school. Because we have in Germany, obviously, the opinion that learning is something that that has to be sweaty and hard and painful and nothing to do with entertainment. So this is something very German.
That's actually true. I can relate to that because I'm German too. And that actually works well with the next question we have. Someone said the challenge seems to be that there's a great need for serious games, for example, in the social and health sectors, but the social sectors also has no money to pay for them. Like, do you have any good ideas for that, like how to solve this or anything?
There was a call for serious games and gamification in 2016, I think. That was launched by the European Commission within the Horizon 2020 program. But that only appeared once. I don't know why they didn't repeat it, because obviously there were a lot of people submitting their proposals for this. So that at that stage was a good occasion to get money for the development of a serious game. Well,
Yeah, I made the same observation. So there are some calls from different funders, but the problem there is this sustainability. So
yeah,
to my mind, any project where you engage, for example, academics to develop something, then yes, they can develop something to some extent. But for most academics, the main the main credit is publications and research.
yeah.
So then that will be much emphasized. That's one thing. And the second thing is that when the project is over, there is no owner for the game, so it will not be maintained. So to my mind, the question actually is the big one about the potential business models for serious games, because I believe that in order to make it sustainable, there has to be some sort of business model, and I think it may vary between sectors very much. So I think, for example, that is why maybe healthcare and health games are gaining some success, because there are some potential funders there. For example, insurance companies who have a big interest in combating obesity, for example, because it is potentially a huge cost for them. So there is like a money incitement to do that. But overall, I think that is a big challenge. To my understanding, the fact that there are probably very many different potential business models for serious games in different sectors.
Yeah, and again, right, you see successes. So you see something like Mindspace as one of the kind of the super successful mental health apps that are gamified and have a large-scale commercial success. I think my favorite example is Duolingo as a kind of as a language, as a game-based language learning platform, which illustrates exactly the point that you made, which is the standard funding model is focused on researchers who are then incentivized on producing research. They're not incentivized on making and sustaining stuff that works at scale. So Duolingo worked before because the researchers at Carnegie Mellon basically said, screw that, we're going to turn this into its own, in this case, non-for-profit business, and just going to devote all our time into that instead of trying to scrap together continued research funder funding for doing something that is development at scale and where there is no research contribution to it. So yeah, so kind of the missing middle of funding between here's a nice prototype that could work, and then to have a stream that says now this is incentivizing and funding people for actually building it out, sustaining it at scale. That's missing, that's often falling down. And I think that's something where, again, I would not look towards traditional game publishers because that's not their business model either. Like they understand business to consumer. We know gamers, we know games for entertainment, we know our marketing channels, etc. So this is an area where you then would have to go to basically venture capital that targets your particular vertical, education or health or similar, and says, okay, I understand that. Give me a business model and a market model, how you develop a product for health, and that this product then is a game for me is secondary, right? You need to make a business pitch first and foremost that tells me how this is a compelling, scalable education product. And then the game part of that is secondary to that question.
Yeah, I also think that the examples that you bring up make the point that if you're in a space where there's not a lot of risk-willing capital to finance a big sort of development, then you should veer towards gamification rather than developing one of those large serious games that some of the examples we had at the beginning of our favorite serious games are, right? I mean, Duolingo is obviously a serious game, but it's also sort of gamification, right? And I think that's probably the way to go in the social sector, at least with stuff that I've been doing in with municipalities in Denmark. That's the way they're drawing it towards. Also because a lot of the people who need the help in the social sector do not necessarily have the patience or the mental bandwidth, because they have a lot of other different issues, including poverty, by the way, often that prevent them from being engaged in large game solutions. So the gamification could probably work better in that direction.
Oddly enough, I recently gave a counter recommendation at a workshop in Vienna about gamification, where everybody says, where's gamification now, 10 years later? And I said, well, basically, it's now sort of in the throes of disillusionment, at least in certain, again, right, in certain sectors where people say, well, it's not everything that it's fessed up to be or professed to be. Such that there, my recommendation right now, particularly in health, is talk about behavior change design as the broader umbrella, which also, again, in health or financial self-management or similar areas, is much better understood, actually has better empirical support, and easily kind of encompasses game design strategies for motivation. It's kind of saying all of this is designed for behavior change. So that's a less contentious and sort of less used up label than gamification. But again, this might be very much depending on which audience you talk to. So for certain audience, gamification is still new and shiny, and serious games is weird. For other audiences, gamification is burned as a label, and they want to hear something else. Know your audience, basically. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent point, that you should probably never say gamification before you know people very well, right? It's just like pineapple in a pizza. You don't order it unless you know people like it.
I see pineapple and pizza is a huge topic. So we've got another question, and that is, if you were to start a new studio that focuses on serious games production, where would that be and why?
It depends on the topic of the serious game, I would say, because I would rather look at a place where I know the topic the serious game is dealing with is there is a community for this topic, very special topic, and then and that there are also game developers, so that everything can be easily brought together. But I think it is important that there is also an environment for, if you are doing, for example, a health game, that there is a certain health infrastructure in this place available, that that there are people you can talk to and maybe add to your team, that there is this infrastructure available too.
I just take the chance of doing some self-promotion and say Skövde, because we have a serious games development study program which we run since 2008. So I think we were probably first in Europe to have that. And we also have the incubator and this business infrastructure. Even though that is primarily targeted towards entertainment games, they understand games in that sense. So maybe what we haven't succeeded with here yet is to combine those two in a much more successful way. So that would be maybe something for us to try and improve on.
Going to the discussion, I had the example of this drivery that we have here in Berlin, there is a place where all kind of startups are working together in one place, and it's all on the overall topic of mobility. I think this is a good approach, and that could be also maybe interesting for serious games. At least this is the idea I had when I said earlier. I think there should be an environment that is also linked to the topic the serious game will be about.
Maybe I can give a few words on this. So it was when and where, right? That was the question.
Mm-hmm.
So 2 years ago, and in Finland, exactly as I did with my team. The reason for that is that Finland is absolutely striving with education and as well games. And generally, especially the professionals of different fields from education, healthcare, and so on, they really truly understand the positive impact that gaming technology can get, and working with the professionals from the games industry. So already here, this is the place to be if you really want to create. And also we know games. I mean, what else is to do in Finland than make games? Because it's cold and miserable. So might as well have fun while doing it. So this is why I think this is really good place to do so. But of course, as a Finnish community, gaming community is absolutely fantastic, because we share all the goods and bads and everything, and there is always people from the industry who are there to just like, you can easily reach out and get the feedback, which is quite unique considering other countries and other cultures. So we are very transparent, and that is again something that makes us able, like empowers us to actually pursue this, which otherwise everyone's saying, oh, why would you even bother with it? Well, because, well, we believe in it, and yes, we have opportunity to do it, and here we are doing it. So yeah. So
yeah, I agree completely, Natasha. I think that was the perfect match the Finnish government was doing there, because you were always, or you are always, the winner in the PISA study that is doing by the European. This is the European comparison on learning outputs. And we have a saying in Germany: you can only win with the Finns. Because, well, you are very successful in learning outcomes, and then the gaming industry was heavily supported, and that was extremely successful some years ago, and then doing the somehow incentivizing the match between learning and gaming. I think that was very, very good.
Absolutely, and we are super happy to collaborate, as you might have noticed. Generally, people, I mean, also veterans from the games industry, not just educators and so forth. So, as said, like the place and the potential partnerships, especially for global, this sort of like programs, and also we are more than happy to share our know-how, especially from the education, as you know. So this is something that has been going on already for years, and we keep on doing. So yeah. Happy to help.
Yeah. I think the German government should take a look at that and do some linking there. I think this would be a great idea.
All right. So first of all, I'm going to thank you now for coming here, for answering questions to this point. And I've heard that Christine wanted to take over because I have to be in another session now. I really enjoyed talking to you and listening to you answer all the questions, and I hope you have much more fun during the rest of the session with Christine then. I'm just going to wait for her to pop in, and I'm going to shoot her a message again. Wait a second.
Thank you, Lisa, for helping us.
Yeah, and the pizza imagery, that was very useful.
That was really interesting as well. I think pizza topping is something very interesting to get to know about somebody.
Oh, so I should. Christine is just asking me in the chat that I should take over because her internet is not doing well.
If that's okay by you, then I'm just gonna stay in the chat if there is any other technical difficulties, so I can tell someone and they'll be there right away, just so that you know.
Okay.
Okay, so if that's okay by you, you can take over, and I'll be in the chat just chilling then now.
Okay, thank you, Lisa.
Okay.
I will take over.
Okay, see you
I
then.
will take a look. Bye. Thank you. I will take a look whether there was a huge discussion in the chat. I can see on the pizza subject. Maybe this is something we shouldn't continue. I'm looking whether there are. Thomas Alström, he is asking, perhaps serious games is not a very good label marketing-wise. Would you like a serious game or a fun game? Any suggestion for another name convention? And then there was an answer in the chat. Applied games is proposed, which is considered not very sexy either. Do you have any ideas on that? Sebastian already wrote applied gaming, Sebastian.
Yeah, applied games and applied gaming, because it's pretty neutral. Like, no community right now feels that they own the term, and applied is pretty broad and neutral. I agree with the commenters in the chat that it's not sexy, but again, it's also not negatively or politically charged in any direction, and it's pretty broad. So applied gaming could even entail something like teaching computational thinking with making games in Scratch. So even game making as a pedagogy, for instance, would be an instance of applied gaming, or edulabs or whatever. So that way you're not necessarily tied to, here's a game that teaches you something. It could also be game making teaches you something, or just playing existing commercial games might be beneficial for you, might have applied purposes, or sort of using game design in other contexts might be. So applied gaming is this nice, again, not charged, broad umbrella term that I, for all of these reasons, prefer using.
I could imagine also purposeful games or purposeful gaming as a similar term. In China, they refer to it as functional games. We learned, and it's a big thing. They talk a lot about functional games, and they want functional games.
It's good when games function, that's true. When it comes to applied games, that's actually quite commonly used in Finland. Although I think that generally this whole sector needs some proper PR sales person in tight white pants to actually help us make a proper marketing kind of approach out there, because none of us is really, neither academics nor game devs are really good at selling. So we need someone proper to make the branding for this, I would say.
Yeah.
No offense to anyone, but yeah, I don't think we have what it takes. We know how to make stuff and so, but how to sell it in a sense of to sound sexy, yeah, I would leave that to someone who knows better things with words than we. We can just make stuff happen.
Yeah, I agree.
But I don't know if you can hear me because, sorry, my internet keeps breaking down. If I may ask a question of my own, because I've been burning to ask it. Now, listening to you first about whether there is a streaming platform, any kind of platform to sell, also to listening what you said earlier in the recording about the need of trust and need to set up a business with as a collaboration more than a client customer situation. So I find this very hard if you want to start a business. I mean, Kerstin is doing it exactly as it probably, I think, is usually being done. You do yourselves either a serious game, or you, which I think is happening a lot, you use it as a gap filler financially and do one in between. But there are many companies that really focus on doing, having a profile as a serious game maker. So how do they start? Do they start like Kerstin, or do they sit there and wait to be commissioned? Do they look for a commissioner? And so if you really want to start as a serious games business, where do you look to? And is there a way that's what we're asking this big question about incubation, that incubators could be better equipped to help these kinds of startups that have sort of set their goals on serious games in a serious way and not as a financial gap filler? Because these financial gap fillers often make serious games, gave it a bit a bad reputation. It's like making something nice, and that's already a serious games, which we of course have said it's gamification. But if you really set your goals into serious games, how can the whole industry take this up more seriously, in your views?
I think we pretty much advanced already.
Perhaps I would pairs to come back. Sorry.
Okay.
The pair stopped his recording session with saying that some came back from the incubation and then they had questions that only you could answer. What were these, for example?
Yeah, so I think that to start with, I don't have a suggestion for a solution. So I'm pointing to some of the problems or challenges that we have encountered. So one important thing, I think, that if you go to a potential client, let's say for example a teacher or a school organization, and say that I want to propose this idea of a game to solve a problem for you. You actually need to be quite knowledgeable in pedagogy, in the topic area that you're proposing the solution for, because you are more of a consultant than a game developer. And if you think of any other consultant, you would not hire someone just out of school with no track record as a consultant to solve challenging problems. So I think that is one thing. You have to understand the area you're targeting. Then you also have to understand games, obviously, game design, game development, to be able to translate whatever you're suggesting into a functional solution. And I think the combination of the two is not super easy. And you see, I mean, if you just compare it to game development overall, you're used to the cross-disciplinary team with very many disciplines, and you have that working. But if you move in this direction, you add another component to that interdisciplinarity, and I think that is a huge challenge.
I think if the question is what incubators can do, one of the things that the incubator that we have in Greno is very good at is using the network of the business developers that we have connected to connect the companies with the games industry, both in Denmark and globally. I think that incubators might cultivate broader networks and networks that reach into other industries as well, if this is the ambition, to make it easier for startup companies to go into serious games, right? Because that's, as you said, Per, you're not going to hire someone who's just right out of school to work on a very complex problem unless there's some sort of way in through the network of someone that you trust, whose judgment you trust, and that might be one of the people who are in the incubation thing.
Yeah, absolutely, network, and also mentoring,
Yeah.
like, but from the other people from the same industry, from the same area, from the like, because we all go, especially as companies that actually make sustainable business out of this field as such, no matter what kind of focus it is in gamification or gamified solutions or games per se or whatever. So basically sharing this know-how, and because the mistakes are the same pretty much as an entrepreneur if you start, but then there is specific kind of the special cookie jar when it comes to serious games and so on. So basically really to share that, and this is where I really love the way how in Finland it's all transparent, and this is I'm hoping that we could do this again outside, that it would be more common that accelerators and incubators and so on would really have this type of very open-minded program that, you know, mentors and are there to really open up also their stories and mentor forward the younger teams and individual, depending now is it solo studio or not. They sort of like what to be aware or you know, in their specific type of products or services they're doing, what kind of things to really look at, because it's really different for and also different countries and different target audiences and so on. So mentoring.
Okay. I think there was a question. Yeah, Ruth?
I think I agree with all the things that was said, but I also see that there is a lot of advancements all that we have achieved already. Because when I was working with the German trade association in 2006, and we held our first German serious games conference, there were a lot of people not very fond of this idea that a game association was dealing with serious games in a conference. So I think if you take that into account, there is a huge development since, at least here in Germany, and I think all over Europe. So, but I think the crucial thing is to have this all combined, to have the expertise from the gaming and from the other area, and this in the combination. And you also need financing, and that is another huge problem, because, well, in general, investment for games is very difficult to find. At least in Germany, the banks are not very fond of supporting entertainment games, and well, that is also an issue that is making the development of a serious game difficult. It depends on the topic, of course. Maybe you find a, I don't know, foundation or insurance company or something like that can help. But, well, I think there are a lot of tricky aspects when it comes to the development of a serious game.
Would it be? I think I kind of have to run. There are kids that I have to take care of now. Is it okay if I log off?
Yes, of course. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Bye-bye.
I learned a lot. So that's
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Yeah, perhaps we just go to Anita's question. I'll quickly read it if you can hear me. The challenge seems to be that there is a great need for serious games, for example, the social and health sector, but the social sector has no money to pay for them. Any good ideas for that?
Very difficult, I would say.
I think we talked a bit about that maybe earlier in the session. That's where we had this thread about the different business models and all those things, and that there are huge differences between areas. Now we had a discussion. I think that was sort of that topic.
Okay. I'm trying to see if there are any other questions.
There is this one from Thomas, I think. It was very much in the beginning. Let's see. No, from Nicholas.
They're often they're copied from the
okay.
Yeah, from the earlier questions. Yeah.
Making a serious game, it's always a balance between making it both entertainment and informative, which is much harder than one may think. Do you have any advice on how to make a game both entertaining and informative without getting lost in between?
Okay, let's wrap up a curriculum of 4 years of serious game design into one pithy sentence. That's the fundamental challenge, or that's the fundamental question: how to sort of have these two agendas, make it entertainment and effective, align with each other and support each other rather than pulled in different directions. My one short answer, and I'm less and less confident that it's the only answer. One short answer is this idea of intrinsic integration, which has been floating around in educational games for quite a while, basically goes back to Thomas Malone in the 80s, although he understood it slightly differently. And that says, for learning games at least, can you make the thing that somebody is supposed to learn the core mechanic of the game? Can you make what you have? So if you have to learn about the physics of levers, can gameplay be all about manipulating levers and having to understand and learn physics in order to progress yourself through the game? So it's basically this kind of idea. So that would be an intrinsically integrated one, while saying vocabulary shooter, you basically have a kind of Space Invader model where letters fall down and you try to type the right word in English that is falling at you as fast as possible in order to translate it from German. It's not intrinsically integrated because speedy typing has nothing to do with vocabulary learning. So there, the game mechanic of speedy typing is in conflict with the core thing that you're actually trying to teach or develop. Again, that's just one idea of many. It's by far not the only concern. Chiefly applies to learning, but it's one little answer.
I completely agree with that. And in addition, I think that at least I think in most of the cases when you enter this area, you essentially say that we as a serious game developer, we can do this a little bit better than you do it normally. In some other way, it's more motivating, it's quicker, it's more efficient, or whatever. And I think that the trick is to be able to very clearly identify and explain to the client exactly what is the point of the game. Why is it better? Why is it more efficient, or whatever you're claiming? And being able to actually show that and demonstrate that, because that would be your essential unique selling point. It doesn't really make sense to come to, again, if you take the example of teaching and schools, it doesn't really make sense to come to a school and say that we offer learning, but it's slightly more inefficient, or it's more time consuming for the teacher. It adds to your workload. It doesn't work that way. So that would be my additional key point, to be able to determine and explain exactly why is this better or useful or beneficial, and being able to show that in some way.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah.
It reminds me now of something Professor Bremer said from the HTW, who is also a partner in our project. So we've discussed serious games a lot. And he once proposed the word smart games for serious games. Sorry, I should have remembered earlier when we discussed that. But the reason why he used that smart games as a comparison to smart food. And smart food is meant to be healthy, and you should be able to lose weight, etc. but it's so good that you want to eat it because it's good, and you don't want to eat it because it's healthy. So if a game would manage to do that, to people play it for the own sake of the game, and that it's like a bilateral or collateral benefit of whatever the purpose is behind that, then in his view you would have reached the goal of doing a games for another purpose. It should not be on the front and not be. You shouldn't feel it that the purpose is there. The purpose should come while playing it without realizing it's there.
I liked Sebastian's answer a lot, and I don't think it only applies to like explicit learning games, because I was thinking about what like the game does we develop at the moment, and it's basically the same there. Like the main mechanic is this little creature that represents the depression, and it holds you back, and you really don't learn like explicitly about depression or how it functions or stuff like this, but you see how it hinders somebody. So I think that's, I think having like the connection between the topic and the game mechanics, and I think that also applies to narrative. Having this all three meet up and make sense, it's difficult, but I think it's the only way it works.
And for learning games, I strongly believe that if you can relieve yourself of the idea that everything has to be in the game, that is a big relief, because if you can put the game into a context or make use of the usage context, then everything does not have to be in the game. Then, for example, guidelines for how to use the game, or teacher guides for how to use a learning game in class can add a lot. Then it becomes more of a tool in the toolbox than a standalone solution, because to my mind, the standalone solution will always be much more complicated.
I think what Kerstin said is more that you experience the situation, and you can, to my mind, you can better learn something if you are experiencing it. Wouldn't you agree? Because, well, you experience that the protagonist or the character is being held back, and this is, you are experiencing the whole situation. You are not just learning, doing something, repeating something. It's more experiencing the whole situation.
The principal idea in a lot of learning is that, yes, embodied, experienced, and active, actually doing it, so learning by doing, all of these forms of learning are far more effective than our classic idea of learning, which is to have some kind of representation, usually on paper or on screen. You watch it, and then you have to do all of the effortful transfer of, if I see somebody in a text describing how to hold a golf stick, how does that translate to my inner body feeling when I actually do it, right? It's a humongous difference from somebody correcting your own body posture while you're standing there, and that actually applies for most human practices. It's not just golf or physical practice. Even something like data analysis benefits from this kind of instructed action, demonstrating, learning by doing, etc. That said, again, from the learning sciences, that we know that a lot of things benefit from this cycle between being instructed and doing, and then externalizing and reflecting and talking about it. And there are different kinds of knowledge and practice that need a lot of externalizing and talking about it and reflecting. So that's why in kind of the simulation and gaming community, which started up around business games and war game simulation in the 60s, and has like, at this point, 70 years experience of doing this kind of learning through games, they say the debrief is where the learning happens. You do the simulation, but then the learning, the cementing of anything that happens there, the aha moments, that happens when you talk through and reflect, what did we do in the simulation? The simulation in and of itself, so just the doing is not enough. So yes, for many things it is, much more effective than just reading about something, but it's the combination of doing it and reflecting upon it that together make for a very successful learning experience.
Yeah.
I think it also depends on what kind of skill you're teaching, because if you have social skills, stories are powerful to learn something or to be aware of something as well.
I have a lot to say on this topic. I'm just like, I don't think we have time today for this. But yes, like narrative is absolutely crucial. And the stories when it comes to, I mean, the whole notion of interactive storytelling and the visual narrative, not just like reading part, but generally utilizing stories, because we as humans, again, stories are the ones that really emotionally engage individuals in various ways, very much depending on the current mood and interest and whatnot. But in general, yes, there is so much to be done in this field. So yeah, I think we need a whole conference to cover this. So that's why I'm pretty much kind of quiet, because I don't know where I would start.
Okay. Well, I think you're right. We are sort of running out of time, and thank you very, very much, all of you, also the audience, to have been so actively involved. But the panelists have done a great job. Very interesting statements, very interesting discussion. And yes, I'm sure there are going to be conferences on serious games, because the topic is being more and more discussed, which is good. And the industry for it is sort of establishing itself, I think. So thank you very much, all of you. And bye-bye, and have a nice rest of the devcom.
Likewise, thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for inviting us.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Bye. To see
Bye.
you. Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Bye-bye.